Hey, welcome everyone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is GleeCon, and I am thrilled to be here with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thank you for tuning in. On our last episode, we began Duskwood. I really had a good time taking our human paladin and starting to do the quest in that zone. Check it out; it's a fun zone. It's kind of one of the ones where we broke it in half, so the second half of that first chunk will be done at a later date when we get there with our human priest. So that's uh, probably going to take a couple weeks before we get there because she's at the whole other end of the cycle of the rotation of characters that we do. We've also been reading the Dungeons and Dragons source book. We were winding down in the last one, Dark Factions, in the getting near the end of the last chapter, Dark Factions. We read about the Thorium Brotherhood last time. We recapped that at the beginning of the last episode where we talked about these Dark Irons that offer their services for the highest or for the right bidder if you bring them some materials. And now it's time to stay a while at this end as we get into the Twilight's Hammer, one of the last factions we're going to talk about. Now, these are an odd group. It's a clan, really. It shoots off of a clan that was run by Chokegall and Gul'dan, and they worship the old gods, essentially, in chaos. They are of an unknown number, but estimates range from several score to several thousand, and these are straight chaotic evil. Now, the known Twilight Hammer cult centers are based in Silithus. They have a bunch of Black Fathom Deeps in Ashenvale, the Masters Glyve and Darkshore. We've killed a bunch of those, and in Blackrock Depths. Black Fathom Deeps as opposed yeah, so that's Ashenvale and Blackrock Depths, yeah, duh. Okay, so the Twilight's Hammer searches for signs of the old gods and a means to destroy the world and return the old gods to power. Light work. The Twilight's Hammer is a relatively new cult, but worships beings far older than any other. Its fanatical members believe that in the near future, the old gods will break free of their imprisonment and return the world to the way it was before the Titans' arrival. What this means for the cultists is a matter of debate within the factions, but this does not deter them from trying to bring about this apocalypse. The story of the Twilight's Hammer begins with Chokegall, the first ogre mage. Trained in the arcane arts by Gul'dan, Chokegall was one of the most feared and respected members of the Horde during the First and Second Wars. Chokegall was made the leader of an orc clan after its previous chieftain was executed for disobeying the Shadow Council. The clan's name was changed to the Twilight's Hammer. Its original name and that of its former chieftain was stricken from all records. Under Chokegall's leadership, the clan became increasingly nihilistic and eventually sought the destruction of all creation. When Gul'dan abandoned the war effort to seek the tomb of Sargeras, Chokegall and the Twilight's Hammer clan followed. The Ogre Mage believed that opening the tomb would mark the beginning of the end. Although it didn't enter the tomb, the Twilight's Hammer clan was slaughtered anyway by the forces Orgrim Doomhammer sent to destroy the traitor clans. That's at one of the epic final missions of the non-expansion part of Warcraft 2. One might think that this would be the end of the line for Chokegall's end of the world. Yet, though Chokegall is presumed dead, a few of his followers certainly survived, as did the Ogre Mage's eschatological writings. These manuscripts were soon discovered by delvers into dark lore. At first, these researchers among a wide variety of races worked independently, but eventually they banded together with the survivors of the fallen clan and discovered the truth of Chokegall's nihilism. The Ogre Mage and his clan were being influenced by elementals who had served the old gods long ago. Before being forced into enchanted sleep and imprisonment far beneath the surface of Azeroth, the old gods were said to have reveled in the destructive power of the elements. With the reemergence of Cthulhu, scholars have speculated that the old gods, though asleep, nevertheless exert a great deal of power on their surroundings. That's true. Indeed, their unconscious desire to be free at any cost may have influenced a number of key events in Azeroth's history, including the rise of the Silithid and the strange time anomaly that surfaced during the War of the Ancients and nearly unmade creation, as well as the creation of Deathwing himself, as we read. Rather than be repulsed by the old god's destructive nature, many of the researchers were intrigued, perhaps falling under the same spell that enthralled Chokegall. Thus they formed the Twilight's Hammer cult. This new cult is the spiritual descendant of the original clan and even now seeks to bring about the end of the world. Now, there are many good reasons not to ally with the Twilight's Hammer. For one thing, they want to bring about the end of the world as we know it. Yet some groups have, in a way, allied themselves with the Twilight's Hammer. The cult has sent ambassadors to Blackrock Depths with the intention of building a shrine over the Fire Lord's molten sanctum. While the Dark Iron Dwarves do not yet trust the Twilight's Hammer enough to grant them access to the sacred caves, they have contracted members of the cult to run their prison, an arrangement that proves beneficial to both parties. Stories of the tortures which High Interrogator Gerston employs make even a Dark Iron skin crawl. At Black Fathom Deeps, a Twilight's Hammer sect works with a tribe of Naga, but I believe this is an isolated instance, as I can find no evidence of a connection between the two factions as a whole. Oh, just hold my beer as we get into BFA, and we show just how deep that connection is. One occasionally hears stories of Twilight's Hammer sects joining with members of other chaos-oriented races or factions, but these alliances are short-lived as dogmas and egos clash. Although most factions are unfriendly toward the Twilight's Hammer, the greatest threats to the cult are the militant followers of other spiritual beliefs, such as the Cenarian Circle and the Argent Dawn. Though groups such as these have destroyed several isolated sects, they make little progress in striking the Twilight Hammer at its root. From the outside, the Twilight's Hammer looks like a loose affiliation of personality cults. At the center of each sect is a Twilight Lord. Those sect leaders are, without exception, charismatic, powerful, and diabolical. The Twilight Lord surrounds himself with his most loyal and trusted followers. This inner circle acts as a buffer between the leader and his followers, lending him an air of mystery. Within his own sect, the Twilight Lord is often treated as the equal of whatever dark power the cultists worship, and they obey his commands without question. Behind the individual sects, however, is a greater organization. The Twilight Lords form an oligarchy that determines the organization's direction. Though the Twilight Lords are ostensibly equal, a fluid pecking order exists based on power, prophetic ability, and plain old favoritism. Those who can gather the support of other lords through fair means or foul are declared Twilight Overlords and are accorded special respect. Almost all Twilight Lords are spellcasters, although a rare few belong to the martial classes. These disparate sects keep in touch through a kind of newsletter called The True Believer. Written and distributed by high-ranking members of the Twilight's Hammer, The True Believer allows cultists to keep abreast of the latest signs of the apocalypse, or whatever it is these freaks consider news. You might be thinking that such a publication would give the cultists away, but you'd be wrong. First, The True Believer is encoded with a fiendishly difficult cipher. The only written key to the cipher, the so-called Twilight Lexicon, is split into 3 parts, each heavily guarded. Second, even if one were to break the code, the text is still the apocalyptic predictions of fanatical cultists. Trust me, you won't like what you read. Though the Twilight's Hammer cult is dedicated to the old gods themselves remain for the most part a mystery. Only one old god has freed itself from the enchanted sleep and imprisonment that the Titans forced on the old gods in ancient times. Even the elementals have, for the most part, no interest in these cultists. The cultists have little or no way of telling whether their actions please their masters or not. Indeed, many Twilight Lords could care less whether they bring about the apocalypse as long as they maintain their power. Occasionally, though, a group of elementals calling itself the Abyssal Council calls upon the Twilight's Hammer to perform some mysterious tasks, which the cultists readily perform. Now, if you're looking for the Twilight's Hammer, and I hope you're looking to smite him, there's 3 places I'd try looking. The first is right under your nose. The Twilight's Hammer is insidious, and otherwise upstanding citizens of the Alliance and the Horde have been seduced into worship of the old gods. The second is fairly obvious. The Twilight's Hammer cults congregate around relics of the old gods. Whatever ruined temples the Titans left after they imprisoned the old gods serve as focal points for the Twilight's Hammer. Thirdly, the places you're most likely to find Twilight Hammer cultists are those with a strong connection to the elements. In addition to the old gods, the Twilight's Hammer cultists pay homage to elementals. Multiple sects can be found in Silithus, where the savage winds blow without pause. Blackrock Depths is host to ambassadors from the cult who petition the Dark Iron Dwarves for greater access to its fiery depths. What is now called Black Fathom Deeps in Ashenvale was once long ago a temple to Elune. The Great Sundering ruined the temple and left it submerged in water and buried under rock. Corruption from the old gods seeped up and tainted the sacred moonwell. The Sundering awoke the Hydra Akumai, who claimed the ruins as her lair. Thus the temple remained until Twilight Lord Kelrus rediscovered it. This orc sought the assistance of nearby Naga, and together they reclaimed the temple and rededicated it to the worship of elemental water. The Twilight's Hammer has members from all the common races and more than a few uncommon races. Whether they were once Alliance, Horde, or independent, folks of all sizes, shapes, and colors come together to work toward a common cause. It really gives you hope for the future. Or it would, if these fanatics weren't trying to destroy the future. People are drawn to the Twilight's Hammer for the same reason they join any religion. We all need a sense of purpose and connection to something greater than ourselves. The cultists honestly believe that the old gods or the elementals will reward them for their faith or not, or they're just straight up nihilistic anyway, and they are just chaotic. The Twilight's Hammer doesn't take kindly to those who try to leave the cult. Hiding in the hills on the edge of Silithus, you might be able to find the hermit Ortel. He is one of the few people to escape the Twilight's Hammer and survive. He still searches for signs of the apocalypse, but unlike his former comrades, Ortel is seeking a way to avert it, and that could make him a useful ally against the cult. All right, here are their leaders. There's Viral the Vile, male human. To his followers, Viral the Vile is a nightmare incarnate, an immortal servitor of the old gods. In truth, he is just a mortal man, albeit one of great power and influence. Viral maintains his grand facade by destroying all records of his history. Despite his attempts at revision, I was able to discover the following. According to a few fragmentary accounts, there was born to a wealthy family of the Eastern Kingdoms a child who was plagued by nightmares. Now, this is not unusual for the time, but as the child grew, his nightmares became worse. What's more, eventually his nightmares manifested in the real world. His parents consulted priests of the Holy Light, and they suspected that the nightmares were of extraplanar origin. Around the same time, the young man was seen with outlanders who dressed in purple. Before the priests could ascertain what afflicted the youth, he disappeared, as did the strangers in purple. It would seem the boy was inducted into the Twilight's Hammer, possibly of his own volition. Based on these and other details, I believe that the boy in question grew up to be Viral the Vile. Regardless of his origins, we do know that the Viral is not just the cult leader of the Twilight's Run sect in Silithus, but also the current leader of the entire cult. On one hand, Viral is intelligent and diplomatic. On the other, he is thoroughly insane and cruel beyond measure. All traits necessary to gain power in the Twilight's Hammer. Viral dresses in the manner of a high arcanist. His face is ever concealed beneath a hood, save for his glowing red eyes. Okay, there's also Twilight Keeper Havunth, a male orc. This elementalist was part of the original Twilight's Hammer clan. As one of the few survivors of the disastrous events at the Tomb of Sargeras, he sought to keep alive the nihilistic traditions of his obliterated clan. He pored over the writings of Chokal, as well as nihilistic texts by natives of Azeroth. This is how he first discovered the old gods, beings more powerful than even the demons. When Thrall reformed the Horde, Havunth rejected the ways of demonology, but he also rejected the path of shamanism. Instead, he turned to the worship of the old gods and became an elementalist. While it's true that the current Twilight's Hammer formed independently in several places, Havunth was integral in bringing these disparate groups together. He created the cipher the cultists use, which he based on the grammatical style of the elemental language Kalamag. It's no surprise then that Havunth is keeper of one of the volumes of the Twilight Lexicon, along with Twilight Keeper Exeter, a male human warrior level 20, and Twilight Keeper Mena, a female human priest level 20. Though only in his early 40s, his patchy gray hair makes Havunth appear older. And there's Willow, a female Forsaken. Willow is a rarity among the Twilight's Hammer, a cultist who isn't trying to convert you or kill you. In fact, she's downright personable for a cultist and a Forsaken. Unlike her kin, Willow eschews necromancy for the study of elemental spirits. I suspect her veneration for the old gods brought her in conflict with her former faction, which is why she makes her home in Desolace. Passing herself off as a humble scholar, Willow often hires adventurers to run errands, from collecting rare plant samples to nicking artifacts from ancient tombs. These missions appear benign, even goodly, and she pays well, so she's never short of eager helpers. Yet don't be fooled. Willow is dedicated to the Twilight's Hammer, and every rock and relic brought to her is part of her insidious apocalyptic scheme. You can see more Magic and Mayhem for the Witch Doctor and Enchanted Prestige classes. Okay, what if you wanted to be a hero and questing with, around, or for, or as a Twilight's Hammer member? Well, a campaign in which the heroes are members of the Twilight's Hammer is not going to suit everyone due to the cult's fatalistic attitude. In the end, the goal of reawakening the old gods is impossible for mere mortals. However, if the players enjoy playing anti-heroes, a Twilight's Hammer game can provide a number of interesting adventures. Twilight's Hammer members face adversity both without and within the cult. External missions are much like a traditional campaign, delving into dungeons for lost artifacts, capturing powerful beasts, and fighting the faction's enemies. However, in this case, the artifacts are relics of the old gods, the beast is to be sacrificed to the elementals, and the enemies are shaman. Encounters within the cult can be just as dangerous. The Twilight's Hammer is a chaotic organization that may sound like an oxymoron, but it succinctly describes the complex web of individual ambition that somehow binds the cult together. Members of the cult constantly vie for position. They seek the favor of their superiors, even as they plot to replace them. The leaders hope to attract powerful followers, but crush those who show too much initiative. Beyond the local sects and the worldwide network, they all look to powers beyond this world for their true reward, powers whose motives are unknown even to the faithful. All right, now some adventures about them. Well, there's a tribe of trolls in the Stranglethorn Vale that has become more vicious than usual and attacks its neighbors. The heroes discover that a Twilight Lord has killed and replaced the witch doctor who once led the tribe. Though they once lived in harmony with nature, the cultist is pushing the trolls to disrupt the elemental balance. Or, agents of the hero's affiliation discover that a Twilight's Hammer cult plans to conduct a ritual to summon an Abyssal Lord. The ritual must be performed at a specific place and time, and the heroes must secure the site, a ruined temple, first, and defend it from incursions by the cultists until the proper time passes. Okay, cool. That was neat. It was a nice little that provided us with some more robust backstory. It just helps flesh out our understanding of the Twilight Hammer, and it also helps set us up for when we encounter some of these characters in Classic. And that's one of my favorite things about this book, is it helps kind of preload some of our interpretation of what we're going to encounter as we keep playing the Classic game. Thank you, everybody. We have another episode in the pipe, 5x5, and I look forward to seeing you all, as always, next time on Lore of Warcraft.